Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage and what we're going to be doing today is reinstalling the engine block in the 2008 Acura MDX. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, just want to welcome you here and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out Car Apprentice on Instagram, X, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at carapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. And see the video's description for links to some of the products used in this video. So we've got the engine block pretty much reassembled. I'm going to do some last minute finishing touches in this video and start to reinstall it in the car. So, let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to replace the idler pulley that goes right here. There's a pulley. Here's a bolt for it. Now, this bolt does have red thread locker on it. As you remember when I pulled this off, that's one of the things that kind of surprised me, but I was not surprised because I had seen the same thing on the Honda Pilot. This bolt cannot be reused apparently. According to the service manual, it specifically says you're supposed to discard this bolt. I've found quite a few instances where I've had to replace things that I thought I could just reuse, but that's not the case. So here's a new bolt, 14551 RCA A01. Got that from the Honda dealership. We're not going to reuse this pulley, so I've got a brand new pulley also. And as I've talked about, I go with Koyo. It's the same thing as the Honda. It says Koyo on it. So whatever you get from the Honda dealership is going to match what exactly comes in this box here. So we're going to open this up and see. And they are identical. And all I'm going to do for now is just go ahead and thread this in just lightly. I'm not going to tighten it down at all because we need to get the timing belt on before we tighten it down. I put it in there. It's just a little bit easier to do this right now as opposed to putting it in later when I've got the engine block back in the car. So I'm going to put this on. That's about as far as it will go by hand. That should be okay. I'll tighten that down later. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean the cylinder head holes. So these holes where the bolts go. We can reuse these bolts if they are within spec. So what you're supposed to do is measure down 50 millimeters from the end and then 45 millimeters from the end and take measurements of the diameter. And that diameter can't be any less than 11.3 millimeters. So I've already done that. I'm going to put it just below the tape here. 11.78. I'm not sure how well you can see that. It's around 11.8. And this one also, 50 millimeters down from the end. 11.77. So this bolt could be reused. I do have brand new bolts, so I'm just going to use brand new bolts. And the reason why I'm showing this now is because I want to clean these bolt holes out, and I'm probably going to use one of these bolts to aid in cleaning the holes out. So 8 on this side of the engine block and 8 on this side of the engine block. So I want to get these all cleaned out before I put the block back in the car. Alright, so I'm going to start out with an initial blast of air. I'm going to start with this hole here. Then I'm going to clean the bolt off that I'm going to use. Yeah, the threads look really good on this bolt, so I could reuse it, but I'm just going to go with the new ones. Then I'm going to go in with a little WD-40 also. I'm going to thread this in. Okay, it stopped right there. All right, so this has been sitting for about 5 minutes. I've covered the oil gallery holes because we don't want anything going into the oil pan. I've also covered this hole over here. So I'm going to take the compressed air and a paper towel. And that's going to be about it for that one. So I'm just going to repeat that on the other 15 holes. So 7 on this side and then 8 on this side. And that's about it. And I'll blow this bolt off so I can use it in the other holes also. I would say it's probably best to just spray the WD-40 on the bolt's threads here and then thread it in. Either way works just fine. Alright, so the holes are all cleaned out. There was one hole on this side that was extremely gritty. So definitely make sure you clean your holes before you put your cylinder heads on. Alright, so I think that's about it with the engine block for a little while. I'm going to clean the top here with some acetone. And then we're going to put duct tape over the top of that. And it's a no residue duct tape that I always use. Just going to wipe it gently here. Do the same thing to the other side. I'll let that dry. So here's the duct tape that I use. Again, it's the 3M no residue. Okay, so this rail that had all the axle grease on it is clean. I'm going to reboot the axle later. I want to make sure that this intermediate shaft is stable. So I'm going to connect that to the engine block first. And then I'll pull this axle out. I don't want this intermediate shaft being pulled out of the transmission. Also, this car is really low to the ground right now. So it's really hard to get things out at this point on that side. Alright, so I'm going to get the torque converter out of here and replace an O-ring that's on there while I'm here. I figured I'd just go ahead and do that. I don't want to have that O-ring leaking later and then have to come back in here. Obviously, the transmission and the engine, getting the transmission out would be very difficult. But at this point, I have access, so I'm going to take care of that. So I'm going to drain the transmission. Drain plug is right here. I could just probably pull this out, but I also don't want to make a big mess. I'm just going to drain the transmission now. I have to do it later anyway. So that's 3/8. Fluid doesn't look too bad. It's a little dark, but it's not too bad. Alright, so while that's draining, here is the drain plug. See all that metal that's sticking to the magnet right there. Just going to wipe that off. Nice and clean. And we'll put a new washer on there. Let's spin this one off. Looks like it's crushed down pretty well. I'll have to spin it off. There we go. And here is a new washer. I always use aluminum washers because that's what Honda uses. Part number is 90471 PX4000. And again, as I've shown before, the flat side of the washer goes up against the drain bolt. The rounded side should be over here on the top so that it crushes up against the housing. Alright, so it's just about done draining. Wipe this off a little bit. And this time I will not tighten it down to Incredible Hulk torque. So we're going to go with 36 foot-pounds this time. There we go. Alright, so here is the O-ring we're going to replace. Part number is 91302 PGK 003. Okay, so I'm going to pull the torque converter out. This could get a little messy, so I've got the metal pan on the ground there just in case. There we go. Here we go. Alright, there it is. Alright, so we're going to replace this O-ring. Just kind of squeezing it from the back like this. And then I'll just put that on there like so. Now be careful of these little teeth here too when you put the new one on. So here's our new one. Just gonna kind of run my hands around. I've got a little bit of transmission fluid on my hands, so make sure that goes in the groove. And it's in there. Alright, so I'm going to have to put this in from underneath because I am not tall enough to reach over the core support to put it in. Oops. Alright, so I finally got that back in. I had to pull it out part way and just turn it slightly and then pop it back in. So I had to catch in the right spot. So that is back in. Make sure. Looks pretty good. There we go. It's all the way in now. So that's that. Alright, so I'm going to get the engine mount back there out. I've got a 14 millimeter. Not much space there. And that last one back there. Now I took this platform out, so these two bolts in the front have to be replaced also. So we have to replace all four of the engine mount bolts and these two bolts in the front. Just kind of ridiculous, I think, but that's what Honda says in the service manual to do. So that's what we will do here. Alright, I'm going to put in these two front bolts. Go right here. 90163 S5A 000. Alright, so those are started right in these two holes here. Alright, those get tightened down to 31 foot-pounds. Alright, so those two bolts are tight. Alright, so here's the new engine mount in the box. Not sure if you can see the part number. It is 50810 STX A02. There it is. Alright, so the engine mount is in place. Here are the new bolts for it. 90164 STX A00. Brand new bolts. Okay, so I threaded the bolts in by hand. I'm just going to tighten them down to 28 foot-pounds. Alright, that one's tight also. Okay, I can get out of here now. Alright, so I decided to go ahead and pull this seal out. I actually found one aftermarket by National. So not an OEM seal, but it should work just fine. To get that out, it's probably going to use the oil seal puller like this. The one thing you want to do also is make sure you check the depth of this seal so you know how deep to drive in your new seal. I'm assuming that this is right. I don't think this has ever been opened before. So I'm going to assume that that's the right depth there. It's roughly, it looks like about a 1/16 of an inch above the surface of the case here. Alright, so I've got a drain pan on the ground. And I got a wood shim here. Should be okay without the shim, but I'm just trying to be careful. There we go. Here's our seal. Right there. Alright, so here is our new seal. It's National 710868. The OEM part number is 91207 PY4004. So here's the new one, and there's the old one, and they are the same size. They do have a little bit of different design, but the size is the same, it looks like. So I'm just going to take a little bit of transmission fluid, just kind of run it around here a little bit. My hands are already kind of dipped in it. I figured I'd do this seal now. Like I said, you have these kind of second thought things that go through your mind, especially when after you put the car back together. This will linger in my head, so I just decided to go ahead and do it now. Alright, so we're going to put this new one in. Let me get it started with my hands first if I can. Okay. That's pretty firmly in there. Alright, so I have a couple blocks of wood screwed together. I'm just going to tap on either side, just kind of flip this around, get this to go in. So we'll see how that goes. I don't have anything cylindrical that'll work on that because of the shaft length. Okay, starting to go in. Tap on this side. This one's a little low. This side's a little high still. Just gonna lift up on this leg. Okay. So yeah, so I'll just keep going around tapping it like that. And hopefully we'll get this to sit right. Still a little high over here. That's pretty good right there. I'll take a look again, but I think we got it. I may have to adjust it just a little bit, but it's pretty much in there. Alright, so this is going to be take 2 on the engine block installation. I had some issues last time. As you can see right there, this thing kept getting in my way, so I had to wrap some zip ties around it, and then that's wrapped around the strut. So hopefully that won't move. Also, the transmission was not correct. I'll kind of give you a little bit better angle here. It was tilted backwards, so instead of being level, it was kind of like this. So I was having difficulty mating the engine block up with the transmission. So we've got that fixed now. And how I fixed that, the jack down there was actually under the transmission. I moved it to the underside of the transfer case instead. I may have to add a jack under the bell housing here because it looks like it's tilted a little bit downward. So we'll see how that goes as I get the engine block back in here. So it's a little bit difficult because of the space, and also there's not much height to work with. So I can't use my load leveler on this one, I don't think. It may come down to that. I may have to figure out how to use that, but that has been an issue getting the block back in here. Alright, so I put some tape up in this area on the cowl because I scraped it just a little bit on the way in on the first try, so I want to protect that. I also have some tape down there, down on the subframe, because the oil pan kept hitting there. And I put some tape on the oil pan also. Keep a close eye on the crankshaft key or it's temporarily stored in a safe place. I lost mine in the driveway and finding it took a couple of days. Alright, just like when we removed the block, I'm raising the hood to the vertical position. I'm hooking up the hoist to the engine block, ensuring that the block sits level. Then I remove the stand bracket from the engine block. Next, I wheel the engine block into position. Yeah, it's definitely best to have a second person doing this. Okay, going to have a couple inches, I think. This power steering pump, my goodness. Yeah, this thing is a pain. Get the engine block below that. Yeah, the tensioner is catching also. I'm going to take this off. 10 millimeters. Alright, that's better. Alright, so the power steering pump, I think we've cleared that. We'll see in a second here if that gets in our way. Lowering it slowly. I think I'm just going to have to lower it then just to get past that. Alright, so here's where we stand right now. Got it part way in. Here's the power steering pump over there. You can see the lines getting hung up all over the place. I probably should have waited to put that in, but I think we can work around it. Coming out was definitely a lot easier than going back in. Alright, so I pulled the wiring harness up over the top of the engine hoist. See, there's a lot of harness down there. It kept getting snagged. So I'm hoping that will work. Alright, so a little progress was made. I ended up having to jack up the transmission because the oil pan for the engine was hitting the subframe. So the transmission's jacked up, and when I jacked it up, it actually leveled it out too. So I'll take you underneath so you can take a look. So you can see the jack right there underneath the transmission. I also have a scissor jack underneath the transfer case to level out the transmission. So now I just need to try to get the engine to mate up with the transmission. So I have a third jack over there because the engine is not quite level either. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Not torque down just yet. Ran out of space with this hose here, so I'm just going to use the wrench. I could thread it by hand, at least part way. Okay, let's thread it down all the way. It is not tight yet. Alright, so we're going to put the starter back in. I'm just basically going in reverse order. So the starter is going to go in first. That's the last thing I took out on this side. We have a new gasket. See right there, 31270 RJA A01. So that apparently is required. These things are kind of expensive too. And the starter's way down here. Bring that up here. Rest that there for a second. Make sure I match up the gasket correctly. There's the first hole. And second hole. Yeah, there's a couple tabs on the back for alignment. So one goes in this little hole right there, and then the second one goes here. There we go. I'll start this one in. I'm the king of cross threading, so I always like to make sure things are going in correctly. Okay, that's good. Alright, let's go ahead and run this down. 14 millimeters. Okay, and this one on the bottom. All right, so I'm not sure how well you can see it. The camera doesn't seem to be focusing very well, but we're going to put the engine mount bracket in the front end. And on this project, especially when you pull the engine out, there are a ton of fasteners to replace per the service manual. So I was surprised by that. Here are the fasteners for the engine mount bracket. 90163 SDB A00. And then also the bolt. That's the bolt that goes through the engine mount. That's brand new. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, you got to replace a lot of stuff on this project. Make sure I'm positioning it correctly. I think it goes right here, right there. Hopefully you can see that. So far down there, I can't see myself. That's that. Two started, and then the third one over here. There we go. Now let's run those down, 14 millimeters. Okay. Right, and the torque spec is 28 foot-pounds, 14 millimeters. Alright, so I'm going to put the bolts in for the front engine mount. I had to jack up the engine and the transmission to get the bracket to sit properly on the mount. So I'm going to put the bolts in for the engine mount, and then I'm going to drop this back down. And again, new bolts. 90163 S5A 000. Brand new bolts. 4 of them. Alright, torque spec is 28 foot-pounds, 14 millimeters. Alright, I'm going to put the front bolt in right here. You may have to kind of grab the engine mount right there. A little tab that sticks up, and just kind of move it back and forth until you can get the holes lined up. It is a little flexible. I'll get that started. Oh, part number on that one, by the way, because of course this one is brand new also. 90163 SDA A01. Seems to be going in without cross-threading. Torque spec is 28 foot-pounds. So correction on the torque spec for that front bolt, it is 40 foot-pounds. Okay, so I'm going to put this thing back on right here. Oops, backwards. The mount cover was backward, and I later realized that I installed the mount cover for the rear, so I had to swap them. Yeah, there was an arrow on here that says EMG arrow. And of course, brand new nuts. Oh yeah, don't forget to install this vacuum hose bracket on the mount. These are 17 millimeters. All right, and those nuts get tightened down to 54 foot-pounds, 17 millimeters.